If you've been reading our alcohol-related content, you know by now that we are big fans of whiskey. However, with acronyms like ABV and phrases like Cask Strength thrown around by whiskey enthusiasts, trying to understand liquor lingo can feel like you're trying to decrypt a secret code. In this video, we've compiled a list of 10 essential whiskey terms everyone needs to know. Here's fact number 1. Proof. Proof is defined as twice the alcohol content by volume, or ABV. For instance, a whiskey with 50% alcohol is 100 proof whiskey. Standard figures like 120 proof would contain 60% alcohol, and 80 proof means 40% of the whiskey is alcohol content. While ABV is pretty standard internationally, the proof scale varies from country to country. For example, whiskey with 45% ABV is about 78.90 proof in Great Britain, 90 in the US, and 45 in France. Here's term number 2, Cask Strength. Also referred to as barrel proof, Cask Strength refers to the whiskeys that are bottled straight out of the barrel. This means the whiskey has not been altered or diluted following the aging process. People like Cask Strength whiskeys for different reasons. For some, it's the allure of tasting a whiskey that is a pure, undiluted form, an experience akin to sipping straight from the barrel with a straw. For others, it's the flexibility to control the dilution themselves. The latter advocates for one to first try it neat and then slowly add water, tasting the whiskey after each addition. Adding a few drops of room temperature water to your whiskey will release the flavors, bring out the complexities in the spirit, and soften the alcohol punch a little bit. Just be careful not to over-dilute. Here's term number 3, mash bill. Our ancestors learned long ago that certain grains could be combined with water and turn into alcohol with a bit of luck and patience. Over thousands of years, we have now perfected the recipe. Mash bill refers to the mix of grains used in the production of whiskey. The most common grains used include corn, rye, wheat, rice, and buckwheat. That being said, there are endless possibilities to a mash bill's grain ratio, and a whiskey's mash bill depends on each individual distiller. Here's term number 4, congener. During whiskey production, sugars in the grains will convert into alcohol using different strains of yeast. The yeast convert amino acids naturally present in the sugars to ethyl alcohol, also known as ethanol. While ethanol isn't the main outcome of the fermentation process, there are other byproducts collectively known as congeners. Examples of congeners include tannins, methanol, acetone, and more. Researchers believe that congeners are primarily responsible for creating the flavors and aroma found in a given whiskey. The amount of congeners present in a whiskey can vary, but as a general rule, the more distilled the spirit is, the lower the congeners. While this term may not be found on the side of a bottle, it pervades the whiskey industry and affects every batch of whiskey made. Term number 5 is angel share. For over 2 centuries, whiskeys have been mainly aged in wooden barrels. The wood absorbs some of the more unpleasant aspects of the whiskey distillate, such as sulfur, and in return imbues the liquid with flavors unique to itself. Traditionally, it was believed that this whiskey evaporated up to the heavens. Thus, it was coined the angel share. Since most whiskeys and scotches are aged for many years, the total volume can drop quite significantly. For example, a 10-year-old scotch can lose up to 20% of its volume by the time it's ready for bottling. Term number 6 is blend. A whiskey that has been created by combining multiple other whiskeys and sometimes also neutral grain spirits, colorings, and flavorings is called a blend. For example, blended malt whiskey is made by combining single malt whiskeys from different distilleries. Blending whiskey is considered by some to be an art, requiring an immense base of knowledge and careful experimentation to maintain the integrity of the end product. But are single malts better than blends? Simply put, no, they're just different. While many blended whiskeys are cheaper than single malts, that doesn't mean that single malts are necessarily better. Blended whiskeys provide a huge range of flavors, as you'd expect from something created by mixing whiskeys from different distilleries. In fact, they not only rival single malts not only for complexity and flavor but also for price. Some of the most expensive whiskeys ever auctioned were blends. Term number 7 is finishing. Finishing is a relatively modern phenomenon whereby a distiller transfers whiskey from one type of cask into another. This adds complexity to the whiskey, depending on the type of cask used. Very little is known about what happens to the whiskey when it's recast. It's a technique largely based on trial and error and shared learning between distillers. A similar term, finish, is a reference to the tail end of a drink of whiskey, specifically the flavors that become apparent after you've swallowed the whiskey in your mouth, aka the aftertaste. Term number 8 is nose and nosing. Smell and taste are inextricably connected, meaning flavors are dulled when you are unable to smell. Thus, smelling or sniffing, aka nosing, whiskey is an important part of the whiskey drinking process. Some people with more advanced palates are capable of identifying certain profiles in a given whiskey simply by smelling it alone. But for many, this skill is improved by learning the proper technique and choosing the right glassware. Smelling your whiskey can help you pick out flavors and aromas that you won't be able to detect through sipping alone. Number 9 is bourbon. Bourbon is a charred oak, barrel-aged, distilled spirit first invented in the United States in the late 1700s that must contain a mash of at least 51% corn alongside malt and rye. It has no minimum aging period, but to call your product straight bourbon, which is a special distinction of quality, it must be aged for no less than 2 years and have no added coloring, flavor, or spirits. You might also enjoy visiting our website and reading our blog post, A Brief History of Bourbon and How It Became So Popular. Term number 10 is Scotch. A malt or grain whiskey made from start to finish within the borders of Scotland and adhering to a specific set of legal guidelines, including that it must be made from water and malted barley, although it can have other grains added, aged in oak barrels for at least 3 years and be at least 80 proof. Scotch is aged in used oak barrels, including those that previously stored sherry, beer, and yes, bourbon. Scotch also tends to be aged longer than bourbon, with many of the most popular Scotch whiskies hitting shelves after anywhere from 12 to 25 years inside of barrels. Some widely known Scotch whiskey brands include Glenfiddich and Johnnie Walker. Here's a bonus fact that might be useful to know. Whiskey with an EY versus whiskey with just a Y. Whiskey spelled with an EY is a regional spelling that originated in Ireland. It's used commonly to denote spirits from Ireland, the United States, and various other locations. It's been suggested that this spelling is common in the USA thanks to Irish immigrants. Whiskey with just the Y originated in Scotland, and it's used commonly to talk about spirits from Scotland, Japan, Canada, and various other locations. That being said, there's no law that dictates that you have to use one or the other. Therefore, the two terms are used interchangeably. We hope you enjoyed this video, and be sure to like and subscribe to see more content, as well as visiting us on CompassLongview.com. I'm Rob with Compass Longview. Thanks for watching.